Hello and welcome to Oakville Matters. Our city calls itself a town and feels like a village when you meet each other halfway. Today we're joined by Michael Salem, the Director of Communications for the Oakville Community Foundation. Michael, thank you for your service to the province and our community and for joining us today. Today we're going to answer the question as your report is titled, "Can you afford to live here?" And maybe you'd like to start by telling us what you would rather have titled your report.
We talked a little bit about the Rolling Stones line of "Give me shelter," but really taking it back, Mayor Burton, to that idea of housing is a necessity. We all need somewhere to live. It's not an optional idea.
Well, we've been, I guess, in the grip of this housing crisis, or at least the talk about the housing crisis, for going on a couple of years now. The supply crisis has been building for much longer than that. And frankly, nowadays, I think we're probably in the same kind of 2008 housing financial bubble that brought down the world economy back then. And I hope we don't bring down the world economy again. Although when you look around the news, it feels like the world economy is trying to bring itself down every other day.
Yeah.
To cut to the chase, the government of Ontario has decreed that the solution to affordability and supply and all of the things that ail us is a vast increase in the supply of housing. And look, I have an undergraduate degree in economics, and I recognize the theory there that it's supply and demand. And until we have a supply greater than demand, prices aren't going to fall. And so, we can talk about all kinds of subsidized housing. And here in Oakville and Halton, we create about 100 more units of subsidized housing a year, which looks pretty good compared to the other regional municipalities around the city of Toronto. But it's not cutting the ice. And so prices are still going up. What did you find as you looked through all of the data that was available to you? What did you guys find when you put out this report?
Yeah, no, it's interesting because, sort of as you mentioned, it's been all over the news. It's been an international, it's been a local, a nationwide, a provincial issue. And I guess at the Oakville Community Foundation, our thought is looking at these national issues, well, what does that mean for us here? How does that translate into an Oakville concern? So when we were looking at this, one of the things that probably jumps out really big for us is when we look at the increase in rental costs. So locally in Oakville, since 2016, rental costs have gone up 40.8%. So that's huge dollars for people who are renting their home.
Yeah, we don't have, well, first off, in Oakville, it's, as you point out in your report, unusually, something like 77% of Oakville own and don't rent.
Absolutely.
And, regionally, I mean, around the GTA and in Toronto and in Ontario and in Canada, it's more like 65%. So we're low on the number of people who rent in the first place. And then our rental supply hasn't grown at all.
Yeah.
I take the point, well, I'll repeat the point from the CMHC study that I was limbing earlier. It's supply is the problem. How do we get the supply up? Is the Oakville Community Foundation going to start building houses or rental housing?
It would be great if we had unlimited resources to start doing that.
Well, you have more money than God.
Right. But I think some of it is going to be sort of a multi-tier approach. So we need a number of players to come to the table. So we've got the developers, we've got people who want to build. We're always looking, we watch what the town's doing with regards to opening up areas for building or developing new areas or how we're working. But then there's also examples that we've looked at in other cities where they've looked at, we don't so much have laneways in Oakville in the same way they do in Vancouver or Toronto.
Really? Have you? Maybe you don't get out enough. I can show you where the laneways are.
I suppose what I'm saying is we're not sort of as full of laneways in our local communities, sort of in the subdivisions as they are in Vancouver. But where there are opportunities for in-law suites, for basement apartments, are there places we could allow residents to get involved in easing the crisis?
Yeah, it's actually as of right now for people to do that. Um, However, all over the world where this exists as a right, there's not a huge take up.
Yeah.
And I think that's explainable in basic economics. When you buy a house in a neighborhood, you usually buy well, people usually buy what they need.
Mhm.
Occasionally, there is wretched excess in housing, we all know, but
Mhm.
the great mass of us only buy what we can afford, which translates into a little bit less than we might think we need.
Mhm.
Uh, so big construction projects are really, I think, what's necessary. The town, for example, just applied to the Federal Housing Accelerator Fund to for funding for 1,000 more, slightly more than 1,000 affordable units, and
Right.
uh, I don't believe that the answer was favorable, which feeds my perennial theme about the federal government is they talk big and don't do very much. But, they announce money but don't spend it is
I
the
guess some
classic.
of it is
That's the classic criticism.
yeah, and it's finding ways for them to fit in, right? So as I was saying before, like the idea that residents in the community can participate, but that's not enough. As you alluded to, we're not going to convert everybody's home, but then thinking about our neighborhoods from a no one would ever suggest that we would want to change drastically the makeup of Oakville and the neighborhoods that we have. We have some beautiful neighborhoods, but no neighborhood can stagnate. So the idea that there's got to be slow incremental change. And in fact, when you look at going down Reynolds or going towards Lakeshore, there's some great infill of low-rise buildings and other kind of housing options. And I guess for myself, as somebody, I was born in Oakville a long time ago now. And growing up, I think about the number of people I grew up with whose parents still live here in Oakville, but they've had to go elsewhere to be able to afford sort of that starter home to get in. And are finding that commute, the distance between them and their parents is pretty drastic because they had to go so far away. So it's how do we complement what we have with alternatives for people who maybe need that sort of foot in the door opportunity to build in.
Well, I want to salute the foundation for several things that you listed in the back of your report.
Hmm.
The You guys are calling these things impact investments, but
Hmm.
never mind. You made a loan to support the purchase of a new home for the Halton Children's Aid Society so that they could run their Bridging the Gap program. I remember when I was on the board of the Children's Aid Society, there's always been this problem when kids age out of the Children's Aid Society, but because
Yeah.
of the experience that a child has or often has in that care, they're not quite ready for adulthood. They're not quite ready to stand on their own 2 feet. So good on the foundation for because as your report says, that's housed 30 at-risk youths between the ages of 16 and 24 over the last 5 years. And because you've got a number like 30, it says to me that they are graduating them out of there.
Yeah.
So that looks like a small but mighty success on the
No,
part
it's a
of the foundation.
fantastic opportunity. It's especially when you're looking at most people growing up in Oakville are coming out with some sort of family support around them. And when you think about some of the youth in our community who don't have those supports,
And then
opportunities
you
to do
noticed,
better for
I
them.
mean, in your report, you mentioned that other charities, not just the foundation, have been active. And of course, we're all proud of the now very old March of Dimes apartment building. It's 59 apartment buildings down there, and almost half of them are accessible units. And who can forget the battle over the Salvation Army Lighthouse Shelter, over where it was going to be, which raises the point that, you said earlier, well, we have the developers ready to build, and that's true. But
Mm-hmm.
we also still have the NIMBYs, and we have the counselors who are afraid of the NIMBYs. So that produces some, unproductive results, I would say. This term of council, I think this council has delayed and or sent to appeal many times more housing units than they've approved. So we've really got to get, there's a mind shift that needs to happen there before any volume gets done here.
Yeah, it's amazing that, and this is not to say that town council hasn't done this. I'm by no means a critique, But I think about so many of these, the smaller initiatives where we think about getting, like you said, the Salvation Army, but also when we look at, different styles of building within a community, it does take so much of that groundwork, that getting people involved, hearing their concerns. And it's not something that, as I'm sure you're well aware of, you can't just flick the switch and have everybody go, yeah, that's a great idea. It sometimes takes people getting out, getting to know what's being proposed, really understanding that, you're not coming for this treasured community that they tried to get into so hard, but you're working to sort of evolve it with them.
Well, in 2018, your report says some of your fund holders, that would be some of the better off people in Oakville, supported proposed small family units at Margaret Drive with I don't know whether it's a loan or an investment of $83,000. Can you talk more about that project? Like how many units, how many families, or any kind of detail like that?
Unfortunately, I don't have those details handy with me. I apologize for that.
Okay, but still, it's another sign of activity by the foundation in this field.
Yeah, and I guess
it's distressing to see that it's still undergoing pre-development and due diligence. I had because it's embarrassing to me that it would be like 5 years. I was at the conference of the Association of Municipalities a week ago.
Right.
And I was having a conversation with some mayors from the great regional municipality of York. And they were telling me how they've been getting the approval times for new housing down to 5 years. And we're pretty close. We're pretty much 3 years.
Yeah.
So I was feeling good about that. But then when I read your report where this is taking 5 years for just pre-development, I began to worry that I hope we're not causing that delay.
Do you see opportunities to better that in Oakville? To take it from 3 to quicker? Yes,
I do. There's several tools that the province has made available that council hasn't adopted yet. But which a couple of council members and I are recommending. One is called, well, it has a bunch of different names all over the world, but it's the same idea. You pre-zone an area. So usually it's called a permit system, community permit system, development permit system, but usually the word permit is in there. And the idea is that you come in with a project that fits the given prescription for the lot and the neighborhood. And you pull the permit. You don't go through 3 years of weigh-in and poking and prodding.
Right.
And after World War II, there was a major housing emergency, and there was an engine driving a bigger and stronger response by society. In Canada and in the United States, people built houses like there was no tomorrow. But what was going on was millions of guys were coming home from a war. Think of them as trained killers. And all they wanted to do was marry their sweetheart and have as many kids as possible. And they needed a house.
Right.
My own dad was one of those guys. I'll never forget our first house. My dad, my mom, and me, we have a little picture in the family album of, 1-year-old me standing in the dirt in front of this 10 by 15 foot tar paper shack.
Okay.
Plywood walls and a tar paper roof. And we thought it was a palace because some of my dad's buddies were in tents. So, it was people really put the pedal to the metal back then. And
it's
the thing that makes us
finding that balance,
here,
right?
The thing that makes us crazy here is that Canada and Ontario used to be in housing until the Paul Martin era, and then they left. They quit. And our problem's been building ever since then.
Just a failure to continually build.
Yeah, all kinds of assisted housing, public housing, subsidized housing. The country and the province, we knew we needed to do that because we knew that there'll always be a segment of the population that can't afford a home. Yeah. So we've got to provide it because I agree with you, it's a basic human right. But there was this moment back then it was like a historical moment because it happened in the United States as well.
Mhm.
Everybody decided we were gonna get out of that business, and I don't know. They must have believed in the Darwinian theory of only the strong survive or something. But
Yeah, well, and it's
not a
interesting
nice
too,
thought.
because when you bring up sort of that World War II or post World War II era, and North America sort of unique in that when all the soldiers were coming back and we were, we had these smaller city bases and we sprawled out to there was space, so we were taking advantage of it. And I think even way beyond that, but my parents moved to Oakville, I believe it was 1973. And it was ease of access to Toronto. The QEW was a quick shot into the city. They could afford to buy a house here at the time, and it gave them that opportunity. And now it's almost like there's no quick shot into the city. You can take the GO train, and that's brilliant that we have it. But we're starting to think about what are these sort of, and I guess the communities are starting to develop in their own right. So you start to think about all the wonderful businesses and things that have cropped up in Oakville that we want to support here. So
yeah, I agree. There's no fast drive into the city anymore. But the other day in rush hour, I got to Pearson Airport in 35 minutes. So I thought, well,
that's
some stuff is working. And my wife and I use the GO train all the time because the drive's ridiculous.
Yeah, well, and that's sort of, I do applaud sort of the way the town is looking at Midtown and how we're thinking about new developments and then how we're connecting those developments. So I know I've had some conversations with councillors thinking about the idea of rapid transit and how we're considering Trafalgar as a corridor and an opportunity to connect North Oakville to Midtown. And I think the more we can bring these things together to make it easier to get around in our city or town, the more we're able to sort of connect and build those affordable housing pockets that are.
Yeah, the province in 2006 announced that in 2016 they would have a bus rapid transit way operating from Dundas down to the Oakville GO station.
Right.
I was there for the announcement.
Well, it was funny because it was only a couple of years ago I read in the Beaver, I guess the outgoing head of Oakville Transit, and his prescription for sort of what needs to happen going forward. And we think about, and he said, we need rapid buses that people can watch them drive by while they're stuck in transit, that can get you from those great new communities we've built with sort of low car usage up north in Oakville to connect them to the GO train, to the city, to everywhere they want to be.
Well, to give the province credit, it does cast decades-long infrastructure plans out into the future. They do anticipate first a BRT across the 407, then an LRT as population increases, as well as a BRT, eventually LRT across Dundas from Square One over to the other side of Burlington.
Right.
And the aforementioned BRT up and down Trafalgar, just not yet.
Yeah. Do you see that in any near future?
Yes, it's a chicken and egg issue. Before the province is going to lay down a bunch of infrastructure, they'd like to have some idea that the city or town is going to actually permit the growth. So, if you in your official plan, you lay down a long view of growth that you're going to permit and encourage and facilitate. And if your official plan says, yeah, no, then you shouldn't expect the province to be hurrying to build something for stuff that you're going to try to prevent. Now, as it happens, it's clear from what the federal government is doing that we are going to grow. This country is, I don't know, we're probably 40 million now. And it's at the rate of growth that the federal government's talking about. Maybe Canada could be 100 million by the end of this century. When you were in high school, did they ever quote Laurier 100 years ago saying that the 21st century will belong to Canada?
I remember that quote for sure. Yeah.
The idea was, well, someday we're bound to grow, and it certainly looks like that might be happening.
Yeah, it's definitely an area where Canada, when you watch the demographics around the world and you see the population sort of turning that corner where there's no more kids coming up, or a greatly reduced number of children to support the aging population. And Canada's been very good about making sure that our immigration is keeping up to where our birth rate is not keeping up. But then the question becomes sort of, how do we, as a local government, a provincial government, a federal government, but then residents, citizens, philanthropists and charities, how do we all get involved to help facilitate that development so that we can put those people somewhere?
I want to thank you for the way your report made mention of council's move to protect rental housing earlier this year. We're only the third city in Ontario to do this, and I think we've got a bylaw with some real power in it. I think we've improved on Toronto and Mississauga, and we have more ideas to come on that front. So I'm glad it was noticed. And I really like the way your report quotes the Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation, which is the agency that used to be the federal government's point agency in building housing before they got out of it. A 3% vacancy rate is necessary for adequate competition and housing options. And the vacancy rate, we're talking about rental units, in Halton is 1.4%, down from 2.3% 3 years ago. I'm pretty sure that the Oakville vacancy rate is pretty much synonymous with the Halton vacancy rate, although you don't quote our rate there.
Yeah, I would guess our friends in Peel are doing a little bit better in that regard. They're up just over 3%, but it around the sort of GTA on both sides of the city, we're seeing those numbers pretty low. I'm curious, in your deliberations with council, as you said, like we really do applaud the work that's been done to protect rental housing. Do you see an opportunity to do anything else to encourage sort of more purpose-built rental in Oakville?
Yes, we're actually getting applications for significant amounts of rental buildings. We've had at least one application for a 500 unit building at Midtown for rental.
Right.
That, alas, is in some kind of long, it's in a waiting state while council works its way through reworking the plan for Midtown, which I think will finish in January of the year ahead. You know, you mentioned two other things that I thought that people should know, and I'd like to call them out. And one is that we're 35% of the population of Halton, and that 47.6% of Halton's new housing completions between 2016 and 2021 were in Oakville. So I think that suggests that Oakville's pulling its weight, or maybe a bit better.
We're definitely doing some good work. There is a lot of good that came out of this. It's sort of how do we see this continuing to develop and creating more opportunities as we, you think about all of those Oakville businesses that have started here. They are not probably, especially the small businesses, are not employing people at massive salaries. So we think, where are those people going to live when they come to work at those businesses, and how do we make sure that there's that sort of transitional labor force as well? So yeah, well,
the answer, according to Mike Moffat, the University of Western Ontario economist professor, who's done a lot of studies on this for the provincial government and for the Ontario Big City Mayors Caucus that I'm the secretary of. We need to double our output, and the province has identified that by 2031 we need 1.5 million new homes, and Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation says no, you need 3.5. Right. So it's a little bit cheeky for CMHC, that isn't in the game anymore, is sitting on the sidelines saying, oh, by the way, you're not doing enough.
Right.
When what they're doing is zero compared to what they should be doing. But hey, it's all interesting information for trying to figure out the answer to your question, which is, what's it going to take? And it's going to take a doubling of our effort.
Yep.
So between trying to make approvals faster, which is what we're working on, and to get more density where it fits. So we have growth nodes that are well served by transit, and the area around our GO stations is obvious as a source, as a nexus of transit connections.
Yep.
But we also have 5 or 6 others across the rest of Oakville, where again these growth nodes are facilitated by good transit. If we do that, we won't have to mess with our stable established neighborhoods or the stable established neighborhood streets where we live. And moreover, I think if all we did was add basement units to the streets where we live, we won't be doubling our output. In other words,
No, absolutely.
we won't be achieving the goal.
No, and I guess that's so much of what the report came back to us is that, you know, there's not one person or one group that's to blame for the problem. And the solution is not going to be one person. It's not going to be council. It's not going to be the province. It's not going to be citizens building homes in their backyard, but some sort of configuration where we sort of all pull together. We look at opportunities in the charitable sector to fund the places we've talked about already. But then we also look for how we can change the rules a little bit to make it so that it's easier for people to get these things done.
Well, your report and your remark just now are really useful in terms of getting to that goal, because I agree completely with you. We've got to get everybody working together on this. And, when the job is to do twice as much as has ever been done in the history of Ontario, that's going to take a real consciousness building.
Yeah.
The Community Foundation is uniquely positioned to be a leader in raising that. And it's my hope that with this report, the OCF is signaling an intention to be more present, more front and center in this effort that we all have to get involved in.
Oh, absolutely. And for us as a sort of philanthropic organization, so our role has traditionally been to convene people. So we're constantly looking for opportunities where we can put our feelers out and see what's happening in the community, but then also how do we engage people? How do we get people involved, give them the information they need to be able to make a real difference? So for us, we're gonna keep our eye on this issue and continue to work with our philanthropists, but also the many charities that we work with to try and see what we can come up with.
Michael, thank you for a great final word, and thank you for joining us today. Let's look together. Let's work together again next time on Oakville Matters.